Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Wednesday, July 19th. For the accountability section today, we'll jump right into it. I spent most of yesterday installing a ceiling fan. I will say, so far so good on actually the quality and the functionality on this smart Chinese-made ceiling fan. It is not an American brand with a American name. It's not something you get at Lowe's or Home Depot. I ordered it from Amazon on Prime Day. What happened though, that would have taken probably just a couple hours, is I had lost my contact list. Well, I think I have like 2 contact list voltage detectors, and so I lost like both of them over the time. I just don't do a lot of home electrical wiring, and my house is old and wired wrong anyways, which we'll get into that a little bit later. So going forward, I started to just try to be the safest I could be. Theoretically, if things are wired correctly, there would be 2 traveler wires as far as the hot line that are going to a ceiling fan, and then the light switch being off would be safe enough. But you just never know without a contactless pin, which I know how to use, or my contactless multimeter, which I don't know how to use. Like, I just literally don't know how to use it to be 100% certain if there's voltage going or not. And I think what happened there is I was using the Wagyu connectors, which make a very loud snapping sound when the levers snap down, and it's very easy to bump the levers closed. So I took off the black wire, which, assuming that the traveler wire, they weren't actually travel wires, and that the wires on the electrical were somehow just hot. Then the black wire should be the neutral. So I disconnected that. That would that is, I think, the right way to do that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I disconnected the black wire to the ceiling fan and then put a Wagyu on it so that the part coming out of the ceiling is not just willy-nilly exposed. These would have been wire nutted, twisted tight before. In particular, in my wiring, it's aluminum wiring, so Wagyus are actually good for that case too, because aluminum to copper oxidizes, whereas the Wagyus are supposedly fine with, won't cause that kind of oxidization. Whatever the metal is that connects the bar inside the Wagyus to connect the 2 wires won't oxidize for some reason. So I took off the black wire, then I took off the white wire, which is if they weren't traveler wires, if it weren't just the black and white were connecting all throughout, connecting back to the light switch. Then the white wire is the hot wire, took that off. So the only wire left when wiring should be a ground wire. Just the safety ground that should have no voltage in it at all. And as I started to unscrew the cap, let's go ahead and jump into a game. This new event happened, and I did actually manage to get some progress on this monster event. I got like 3 victories in a row. So let's start playing here. There should be no voltage whatsoever on the green safety wire. It is supposed to be only for emergencies. It should never be charged, and even if it was charged, it should drain charges to the ground wire outside your house or on the pole. Immediately. Now, a short to ground maybe wouldn't trigger something in a lot of old houses in the United States, because you would need a whole house ground fault circuit on your circuit breaker, which nowadays it is kind of recommended to not only have ground fault circuit breakers but also arc fault circuit breakers. So there's just like a new generation, more expensive circuit breakers that you probably should have just for safety. But I heard a snap. Now, one of two things happened there, or one of three things happened there. One, there was static electricity on the ground somehow, or a capacitor, or some kind of capacitance of some sort. Maybe not even really a capacitor. There may just have been capacitance on the old ceiling fan or the wiring itself. Or, and I only thought of this hours later, I had dropped one of the Wagyu connectors into just the canopy cover of the ceiling fan, which is just a piece of plastic that covers the top part of a ceiling fan. It is totally possible that that too happened, and then because I had bumped the Wagyu connector, I had knocked the lever and heard a snap and thought that was that. Regardless, that really snake bit me and scared me, and so then I spent an hour to 2 hours after that point trying to find handymen or electricians. Really, my house needs probably an electrician, but electricians wanted, like, the one person that called me back out of about 5-6 people that I called, because nobody wants even as a handyman to install a ceiling fan. They just don't want to do it. Ceiling fans are about $200. The electrician quoted me $500 to install it, and I'm not exaggerating at all. $500, well over 2.5 times the price of the actual unit to install it. Ridiculous. On top of which, the electrician that I called wanted my credit card info over the phone before they would even come out. Which, yeah, that was ridiculous. So I spent a couple hours. Eventually I realized I'm missing an obvious trick here, in that I could just go to Lowe's and buy another voltage detector, contactless voltage detector, which I did, but that was like 3 or 4 hours and a lot of trepidation. So eventually I got the contactless detector. I started to use it. I tested it on a live circuit, and it has a 3-level sensitivity setting. So at its high setting, you can be fairly far away, like a foot away from any outlet, and it will still detect electricity. On its lower settings, you can detect specific wires are charged, or if any wires on it nearby are charged. So yeah, I tested that. I verified that assuaded my snake bitness, my fear there. Mostly I was just being perhaps a little bit too much of a coward, but caution. One of the things that also scared me there too is I had already flipped a circuit breaker at that point. I was just out of an abundance of caution, and this is in the instructions of installing a ceiling fan. A real handyman electrician wouldn't bother to flip the circuit breaker. but I had flipped off to the circuit breaker, and that's when I heard the spark. And then I went and flipped off even more circuit breakers, because I did, after the fact, kind of start to label some of the circuits that are unlabeled in my circuit breaker, and they are just all over the place. Like, outlets, like one circuit is going to outlets on one half of the room, another circuit's going to outlets on another half of the room. I have one circuit that is literally just controlling, like, lights in the hall, the outlets in my formal room, and the ceiling fan in my bedroom. It's just like, no way should this have been wired in that way. The very poor wiring, which is no surprise. Other things I found as I was installing the ceiling fan is that there is a pancake outlet box that has been screwed into a piece of wood, and that's what the previous fan was installed to, which is not the right kind of box at all. Pancake boxes are only for lighting, putting light bulbs on the ceiling, and nothing more, not ceiling fans. The electrical wiring is not even going into the metal box, and the ground is not tied to the metal box at all in the unit. So there's at least 3 violations of code in it, but it's just frankly going to be too hard to fix it, to go into a ceiling and fix it, and it's worked so far. And also, this new ceiling fan I installed is actually probably lighter than the last one, so that there's a decent amount of hope it's not going to just fall off the ceiling. But then, because it was a pancake box, the screws that I was driving into the screw hole mounting points really were giving me a lot of trouble. And so I spent at least 40 minutes trying to figure out, well, am I going to have to find different screws? And then they have very wide washer heads on them, and they need those wide washer heads. So, like, I definitely don't have a lot of washers. I'll probably would be smart to buy some. But generally, you don't need extra washers anyways. So eventually, after many hours, the standing on a bed, very unsteadily installing and mounting the ceiling fans, I got it up there. It's not installed the best way I would like it to, because the box is inset instead of flush. The cushioning on the new bracket is barely getting the edges of just the almost certainly asbestos laden popcorn, and I was definitely knocking popcorn down. I don't think that's enough to really create enough deaths to cause asbestos style lung cancer, but who knows, mesothelioma could come from even the smallest amount of dust. But I think you probably don't have to worry if you're just knocking 1 or 2 pieces to the ground and you're not crushing it into dust and then breathing in the dust. Yeah, as I cough. But yeah, the new bracket for the new ceiling fan is much wider and has foam on the back of it, as a way of reducing vibration. And so it's setting on the plasterboard when a little wonky, and the screws felt a little loose, more like the ceiling fan was just hanging by the screws instead of it being flushly tightened to the box. Although I think I did get it pretty tightened. And in all fairness, the pancake box itself, I think, is literally being held up by one screw. So there's like very likely one point of failure there where if one screw sheared and pulled down, or if the wood that it was screwed into fell down, the whole ceiling fan would fall down. But I don't really think it's that big of a deal, though, because there's not a lot of wobble in the ceiling fan. It wobbles about as much as any other ceiling fan does. The one thing I will say about this Chinese ceiling fan is I don't like the blades. The blades, A, are a little ugly, and B, don't really have a great feeling that they're blowing air anywhere outside of its edges. So you get almost this, it's actually quite remarkable, almost a cone of air directly beneath the ceiling fan and very little on the outsides. And I do have a collection of ceiling fan blades from other ceiling fans, so there might be an argument to swapping those out. But also, I probably wouldn't do it for this ceiling fan because all of that nightmare to the side, I'm actually very happy with it so far. It does have some features that I'd like it to have that are missing. In the sense that it does not have a sunrise or sunset feature as an option. But you can, in the Tuya Smart Life, program that through a lot of work. But it is a 10-speed fan that is smart, and so you can control it all via an app. It also comes with a remote, and it still works on the light switch. Although when you hit the light switch off and then turn it back on, you are going to have the fan off, and then the lights are going to come back on with the yellow and light LEDs at 50%. But you can make a scenario where you test if the fan is off and the yellow and light LEDs are at 50%, and if the timer feature in it is disabled. By testing for all of those things, you know the light switch was just turned on, and then you can trigger any number of settings to adjust the lights to like 100% brightness, which is rather bright, both in the yellow and white LEDs. They say white LEDs, really they are more of a blue cool LED, but when you merge the warm yellow lights, which aren't like bright colorful yellow, they are just orangish warm, when you have both of those at like 100%, you have quite a bit of balanced neutral light that feels like white light at that point. But yeah, 10 different speeds on the fan. I think the fan gets probably maybe 10-20% faster than the ceiling fan I have in my bedroom. And certainly I changed all the ceiling fans in most of the places I cared about in this house 10 years ago when I moved in, and put in remotes, which is just the default thing. And noticeably, I went to Lowe's and looked, and you're going to pay at least $40 for a remote kit. Maybe it's slightly cheaper if you buy a ceiling fan with the remote built in, but compared to getting a smart Chinese fan, assuming this doesn't break, and I guess that's the big question, is how cheaply made are ceiling fans these days that they might actually break to the point where you'd be dissatisfied because obviously it would be unacceptable if it broke in 6 weeks, 6 months, or in less than a couple years. But if 5 years down the line it broke, that's not the worst case scenario. But yeah, the buying one at Lowe's or Home Depot probably is still the way most people do it, unless you really want that smart features. But you are potentially paying a fairly high premium for just having a brand name slapped on it. And for having a remote feature added. Just a remote feature, not the smart connect to a cell phone, schedule it in certain ways, and do more advanced features. This ceiling fan I bought was $150 with the remote included. You're almost certainly going to pay $250 or more if you tried to buy it at Lowe's or Home Depot. Anyways, as far as the features, 10 speed fans. I would say some of the speed fans at the lower side are kind of ridiculous, but I mean, you might as well have the feature. Like, if you're setting it to level 1, you're barely going to feel any bit of a breeze at all. But whatever. There might be some people out there that are really sensitive, or that really just are trying to cycle air in the winter time, which is a feature that this fan can do. It has no pull strings, which is kind of great, because pull strings rattling around or vibrating can be very distracting. I definitely have had a ceiling fan in my bedroom that was a little off balanced, and then the pull string would just swing back and forth, or worst case scenario is a pull string is swinging back and forth and hitting another piece of the fan and clinking and making a sound effect. But yeah, this one doesn't have any pull strings. You can't adjust anything externally. So with the remote or the app, you can switch it reversible, which means you can really just schedule it to go in reverse mode at a specific point, specific day. So yeah, 1st of October, 1st of November, whenever you feel like winter is going to hit you, you could just tell all the ceiling fans in your house to go into the reverse spin modes to push the hot air upward and cycle it more instead of pushing hot air downward. It has a natural mode, which creates a natural breeze on the ceiling fan, which is nice, I suppose. I don't know if I'd really live with this. I put this fan in a different room that I'm not in very often, so I'll have to get reports back from people in that room as far as how much they like the natural mode. And then there is a sleep mode, which seems like a less intense version of natural mode. It feels like natural mode goes from cycles between a fan speed of 5 to maybe a fan speed of 2 or 3, where sleep mode feels like it might be closer to a fan speed of 3 going down to a fan speed of 1, cycling back and forth. So for like 10-20 seconds it'll be on fan speed 5, then it'll slow down to fan speed 1, creating like a natural breeze as if you were outside and getting an actual natural breeze. Let's see what this does. I don't think this is going to work. Wow. That was like the worst place to put it. Then it has a timer in 1 hour increments between 1 and 8 hours to turn itself off. But since I have programmed it to turn on the timer after it's initially been turned on, as an indicator that to not change the default settings, I've kind of eliminated that as a possibility. That seems fine. It's worth also mentioning that the Tuya Smart Life has a beta location detector, so you could definitely set it up so that when your phone left the house, if it detects that correctly, it would turn off the lights and the ceiling fan too, and could turn them all on. Although a presence sensor would be a much better system there, to have the ceiling fans and lights turn on when you're actually in the room versus just turning on when you're within 100 meters of the house. This guy can attack twice. I guess I could have put that in defense mode, couldn't I? And then it has a schedule function built into its own sub app in the Tuya Smart Life. Each device has its own little sub page, and a lot of devices have a schedule feature in the sub pages, but also you can just make a generic schedule in the automations page of the Surface. Also, it feels like Tuya Smart Life is working towards local control on its devices. Now, the one thing I will say is that this is not a Thread Matter Wi-Fi device. It's labeled as a Bluetooth device, which really just means it still uses Wi-Fi, and then it just uses Bluetooth as an initial setup. But yeah, I don't think they've quite gotten to the point where you can really get off their cloud control for automations, but there's obviously a function that they're working on as they've updated things and changed things around on their interface. So, yeah. As far as features, I'm fairly happy with it. The main thing I'd say is it does kind of suck that there isn't a sunset sunrise feature on it. There are other ideas, certainly, in that Google Assistant can control it, so you could either talk directly to Google Assistant, or better yet, you can use the Google Clock app on an Android phone and then run a Google Assistant command when that alarm clock alarm is disabled. So you can totally have an alarm on your phone, have that alarm be changed to any time you want, and then when you disable the alarm on your phone, the lights could come on in your bedroom on the ceiling fan. Unfortunately, if you want a sunrise feature to wake you up before the alarm goes off, or you would have to independently schedule that doesn't work with Google Assistant and the Google Alarm Clock, because somebody has to actually click the dismiss button before any of the features happen, which sucks, and I would like to see that improved upon, because it would make a lot more sense for you to be able to trigger some things before an alarm happens or as an alarm is happening. Actually, let's play as a different deck. This is the one I was playing as, and I was getting some decent success, but since we're actually making footage here, it does kind of suck that you can only go in hour increments on the timer, but whatever. Like, Everything else is programmed very well. There definitely have been, I'd say, 20 to 30% of all 2-year smart devices I get have really poor programming on them, and the features are just not exposed to automations. That is not the case on this fan, although it does have a slight problem in that it has a brightness setting and a brightness setting, and they're both just labeled as brightness, and you have to kind of fiddle with it to realize one is the brightness for the yellow light LEDs and one is the brightness for the white bluish LEDs. But yeah, you can turn everything on and off through automation. You can even get a time remaining on the timer to test to see if less than 480 seconds, so about 5 minutes, is left on the timer. Which, since I'm setting the timer to the maximum of 8 hours every time the fan is turned on, to use that as an indicator to not trigger the code a second time, and I didn't explain that well. I also have to have an automation that resets the timer if the fan had been on for 8 hours in total. Although you could cruelly say no to that and just have the whole thing turn off after 8 hours, and most people would probably never notice. But yeah, you could also be asleep in a bedroom and then 8 hours later the fan turns off. So better that it not do something unexpected, particularly in these kinds of devices. You want it to, every action to feel very natural and expected, and eventually, if you can programmatically control the environment and figure out what settings you want at specific times, eventually you probably would never need to turn on the fan or press a button at all. Like, if you're fine with wasting a minimal amount of electricity and you always go to bed at a certain time, or you always walk in a room at a certain time, you can just schedule the fan and the lights to turn on at that time. And if you always leave a room at a certain time, you could schedule that to happen too. And that is the future to get to, certainly, is that you want that Star Trek The Next Generation future where you walk in front of a door and the door opens for you. You're not having to lift your hands and grab a handle and turn the knob and open the door. You walk into a room and the lights are already on. One assumes that if everybody left the ready room or the meeting room in Next Generation, the lights would have just turned off and the air conditioning and environmental control would just have gone to a minimal setting in those cases. Now, obviously, I have no idea what I'm doing here with this deck. Let's start with the big one and see if we can figure out how to ritual summon these characters. This is probably not the deck for me at the first look. So what you don't want to have happen, to try and explain why I'm turning on the timer on it and using that as an invalidator of triggering the same automation a second time, what you don't want to have happen is somebody is pressing the remote control, not using the app, which obviously you expect whatever you're asking, whatever button you're pressing on the remote to do the thing here. If you were using the remote and you didn't turn on the timer and use that as an invalidator, whenever anybody turned the brightness back to 50 and turned the fan off, so, which is a very natural scenario, the brightness, let's say, was at 60, and the fan happened to be off. So you want it to go down to 50, you press brightness down to 50. Without the timer enabled, that would trigger the automation. And in my case, triggering the automation then turns the fan on to half speed and turns the brightness back up to 100%, which would create a scenario where on the remote you could it does something you're not expecting, and you could really never get to the point that you actually were trying to reach, because you may have just turned it down to 50 because you actually wanted to turn it down to 10 or 20, and then all of a sudden it jumps back to 100, and that would create a lot of confusion, and that's the kind of thing you don't want. But so to avoid that, when you're flipping the light switch and you're turning it on, the timer is off, the brightness for both the yellow and the white lights are at 50, and the fan is off. Though you need to check for all 4 of those scenarios, the timer being off in particular. Then you change the settings. In my case, I turned it to half speed fan, 100% brightness on both LEDs, and I set the timer at 8 hours. And that's the reason that I did do it that way. You could have avoided all that automation and that programming, though, because other devices have RAM in them and just remember what the settings are. And I'll say, if you just kind of flip the light switch, it probably will remember where it is. But if you flip it off and wait like 30 seconds, it'll flip it off. It does have it doesn't have the problem of smart LED bulbs, in that when you first connect a smart LED bulb, some of them to power, they will blink to tell you they want to connect to the Wi-Fi, which is not really a good first experience, particularly if you're having power outages and it is just blinking over and over again because your power went out and then came on for a second and went out again, which is what resets them back into connecting mode. The fan doesn't. But there is also a point to point out here. We are moving to a future where everything is going to have these proprietary LED connections. On this ceiling fan, it's not too bad. It is a circuit board that is a big circle and has a connector in the middle, a 3-pin connector, and the circuit board itself is on magnetic standoffs that are plastic, and they just magnetically attach to the metal backplate, and that's it. So if you were going to, quote, change a light bulb in this ceiling fan, and I know I've spent 40 minutes talking about a smart ceiling fan, but I'm actually very happy with it compared to like the Fire TV Cube that I got on Prime Day that I was very unhappy with and have already given up on. But yeah, if you were going to change a light bulb, you just take the whole circuit board down and replace it. Now, the problem there is it's not standardized, and we clearly need some laws that say standardize size and shape of these circuit boards and the wiring. That would be great. It is the direction we're going, though. We definitely are going to a point where LEDs are going to just be built into fixtures, and the entire fixture is just going to be replaced. And that's going to create too much e-waste in a lot of cases. But also, we are going to get to a point where there are no more Edison bulb style light bulbs. Edison bulbs being the screw-in type light bulbs that are just standard in the United States, or at least the closest thing to a standard that we have. It'll probably take 50 to 100 years, but yeah. Increasingly, everything will be LED, and we should have some standard on it. It would be very hard, but not undoable, to change a single LED if the LED burns out. And that is a slight concern as far as just quality here, is that can I get replacement parts? And if I cannot get replacement parts, how difficult would it be to remove a LED that's probably in series? I would assume that they're all in series and not in parallel, and it kind of doesn't seem like it matters one way or the other. Like, one of the problems with LEDs these days is that the LED backlights on TVs are getting worse, not better. And TVs are getting increasingly thrown away because of a simple LED burning out as part of the backlight fixture. And it's just, they're so cheap and disposable that, as far as the way TVs are made these days, that is definitely a concern. Now, if any other part of the ceiling fan broke, I would have to pretty much replace the whole thing. It is an interesting circuitry overall too, in that it has a snap connector past a transformer box, and the transformer box converts the 120 ceiling AC voltage down to 24 volts at 48 watts. So it doesn't, as a motor, even run at 120 volts, which, if there really was any device that really needed to be at 120, the 240, it probably would be a motor. But on that aspect, I don't know if there's really even that much of a need for a ceiling fan to be that way. I would say a mixer motor, which is running into resistance, or a motor that was running some kind of high torque some kind of high torque fight to it. Yeah, I don't know what that really would be. Like a motor in a table saw, perhaps, might need 120, 240, things like that. But actually, ceiling fan motors, they're just pushing air. Like, you're not supposed to stick your hand up there and fight the ceiling blades, obviously. So that would be the only thing that would give it any real resistance. So running at 48 watts and 240 volts seems perfectly fine. And since the transformer tells you right there 48 watts, that also tells you the amount of efficiency in total for the unit, both the LED lights and the ceiling fan. If you turn the lights to 100% brightness and you turn the fan to its highest speed, at most it's using 48 watts. In comparison, the LED bulbs that were in the old ceiling fan would have been at one point 4 100 watt bulbs, or at least 4 60 watt bulbs. Ceiling fans actually probably shouldn't even have 60 watt bulbs in it, but for the person in that room, they like a lot of light, so they would have had 100 watt bulbs in it. So going from 400 watts plus to 48 watts is a major savings. There were LED bulbs in it, so it really wouldn't have been that drastic of a change. It would have been probably 40 watts or somewhere about that, with 4 10-watt LED bulbs were probably in there. But noticeably, before you put a smart device in there, you can't adjust the temperature on just an LED bulb. So you have to, at the store, know for a fact what you're looking for, as far as do you want warm lights or cool lights, and you can't change it. So you can't say, hey, at nighttime when I want to reduce the amount of blue light, like you wouldn't be able to say, hey, I want to get rid of blue light at the nighttime and only have warm light, or I want to have more blue light in the daytime. Well, this seems to be working. If anything, for as weak and small as these characters are, they do seem to have a synergy to get extra deck style cards. This has not activated once, weirdly. I'm gonna go ahead and assume that these cards are not necessary. Each time he draws a card, he gains life, which got him a lot of life, but it's not gonna help it. So anyways, that's what I've been thinking about and dealing with all as far as yesterday. I did play a little bit of this, but I also didn't accomplish anything. And I didn't accomplish anything else really. The circuit breakers were off, so my computer shut down on the battery backups, and that seemed to work fine, and it seemed to turn on back fine. Darn it, I'm already out of water. Did not prepare well today at all. The only real problem now is my house is a bit of a mess. I pulled out so many tools and things I need to clean up. And yeah, I also needed to get gas and did not get gas for my car. So hopefully that doesn't become a problem. But yeah, one disaster down. The problem here, though, is I have 2 more ceiling fans that need to be replaced. And I could put the ceiling fan I took down because it was not in horrible shape. Like, the ceiling fan that was up there was working. There are some scratches and nicks on the fan blades that don't make them look particularly good. But I have another ceiling fan that has a light bulb socket that's shorted out, so you can't fix that really, not easily. And I have another ceiling fan where the motor is burning out and just not particularly efficient. Oops. I don't think that was a smart move. So yeah, the danger here is that I'm going to need to live with the one fan for probably at least 6 months to make sure it's decent and isn't just going to burn out. Which that would really suck if it did. Then I need to fairly quickly order 2 more of the exact same model, because if you don't get the exact same model, you're going to get a model that looks somewhat similar to it but could be programmed completely differently. Because it's a smart fan, I don't think you're going to have any real problem with the remote controls overlapping, which was a problem certainly 10 years ago with the old remote control units, and that they were all at the same frequencies. Which they may still have that problem, but one would hope they wouldn't. Again, I'm not sure that was a good trade. But yeah, I would need to order them 2 more before they come out of stock. And then one of the ceiling fans is a very high place, so I need somebody else to do it. Like, reaching over my head was not pleasant, and I could do one. I could do the lower ceiling fan that's only 10 feet ceiling, but I have one that's like a 20-foot ceiling, and yeah. Arguably, though, fixing that ceiling fan is not even really a high priority, because there's other things wrong with that room that arguably make an argument to tearing down the whole room and building it up from scratch. It is a very minimal display too. It is just black metal with a white foggy diffuser as far as the way the fan looks, so it is definitely getting away from the idea of a ceiling fan being something pretty. And instead it's more leaning into the idea of ceiling fans just being something that you don't even notice. The idea of like polished brass and fanciness to it is totally missing on that aspect. He ended my turn. Yeah, and I couldn't even tell you the name of it, frankly. So I've talked about the ceiling fan. I can say if you go on Amazon and you search smart ceiling fan, it's going to say it's a Bluetooth fan. It's going to have a picture of a remote and either a Alexa type device or Google Home type device or a phone on it. So if you're trying to look for it. And yeah, if I paid $150 on Amazon, there's a decent chance that it would have been even cheaper if I bought it from like Alibaba or something like that, but whatever. It's a pretty heavy thing, so you're probably getting a decent deal just on Prime Day free shipping, which I did order a server rack that doesn't have Prime free shipping, and that was like $40. Yeah. I don't think I have any Sanctuary of the Skies. Let's see if this works. I want to summon this by... I guess I can use graveyard cards. This is taking forever, but we are going to win. I also received my smart Christmas lights, but I'm not going to deal with that for at least a week. Like, one of my concerns certainly is just the power plug. Like, I may find that the power plug can't be squeezed through a window sill, and so I may straight up need to find some trick to put a hole through a wall. Can I do anything here? Should I do anything here? It's just end the turn. This Cotton said no. Now, this final destination, it keeps triggering. Does that in the game? Well, this definitely feels slower. This is gonna really suck if Final Countdown works for him and he wins. But I'd have a hard time believing it would work for him. Because it seems to me like he's got nothing. And all I need to really do is just attack. So this deck works too, it's just incredibly slow. There is something to be said, though, about this whole setup, is that this event seems to be pretty easy as long as you can win, and so I may get this done fairly quickly in less than the 12 days they're going to give me, or I may get to at least this point, if not this point, fairly quickly, and then be able to move on to just playing ranked play. Although, how much ranked play do I really need to do? Just enough to get to platinum. There's really not enough time in 11 more days or so, 12 more days, to try and get up in ranked play to diamond. It would be nice if you could get to diamond. You can see we are making a lot of progress in a lot of different ways. Let's just collect all of this just to clear up what is left on Monster Festival. Special summon another 27 creatures, normal summon another 9 creatures, and duel, let's see, 23 more times, which dueling 23 more times might be the most difficult part of that. We also have some new accessories, but it looks like they've made it easier now to figure this out and purchase these accessories, so you don't have to jump throughout the whole menus. And they've got it down to this point where you just scroll through everything if you want to go that direction. But you don't have to go that direction. And then the Trap in the Wicked Castle, I think we've already collected a decent amount of cards for. So I don't think there's the best reason to open any packs. We could certainly, or we could just save our gems. 21 days this goes away and we'll have a new selection pack at that point. Then of legacy packs, they're now just absolutely forcing you to use all your legacy packs when you have them. You can't just open a 10 pack anymore. So yeah, new card here, new card here, new card here, and here, and here. And then as far as the number owned, a lot of the other cards we have 3 or 4 copies of, but I don't think we can get rid of any of the extras. Which that's something that really needs to be fixed post haste, to let us destroy the extra cards now before you create a scenario where they eventually let you dismantle a bunch of extra cards and you just get a ton of crafting points. There was this Hearthstone streamer in particular who I think either just had a ridiculous amount of money or was given free gold for Hearthstone, and he was basically, he had every single card in the game at one point, and when the new expansion came out he had so much gold that he could just buy enough packs to get every single new card, to the point where he was literally chasing just the platinum gold versions of cards. And there was a whole system there that Hearthstone did that I think was trying to be more fair, but it just created a more economic minded thought pattern in that cards would get nerfed, and because the cards got nerfed, you could then get full cash back on the crafting points for it. And so he would wait till a new expansion came out, and whatever cards got nerfed, he would then dissolve those into crafting points. Which would give him only even more crafting points or even more gold. And that's a problem, certainly, that only whales would have. But it is definitely a problem when you have a fairly famous live streamer highlighting that the game, like Hearthstone, since it's a new game, could be basically completed. And I do believe that a live streamer, like most Hearthstone live streamers, eventually just lost interest in Hearthstone, or at least the original version of Hearthstone. Anyways, we probably should stop at some point. Maybe do 1 or 2 more games. There's always this danger, certainly, trying to figure out how to play this. Let's see, can we special summon something worthwhile? No. Well, I may not have an article to talk about it, but the new patch for Diablo 4 came out, and I was seeing on Reddit they were on the Diablo 4 subreddit, which has now become one of the front page subreddits, as the certain subreddits have apparently been marked not safe for work and still are marked not safe for work, or they've just been removed from the front page in general. But yeah, they are not happy with this latest patch as far as Diablo 4. They're saying it just slows down performance in every single way. I think performance is the key word there. I don't think it is adding extra grind to the gameplay. The gameplay itself is inherently grindy, so I don't think you'd have to get very specific to have a legitimate argument in my mind to say Diablo 4 is too grindy. Specifically, if I was to make that argument, I'd say the season resets of characters makes the game too grindy, and it definitely doesn't feel like there will be that many people playing Diablo 4 after the first season reset. Like, I could see massive amounts of drop-off actually after the first season reset. And that concept of having season resets, I think, also destroys the idea that there's any real linear narrative experience in Diablo 4, which I don't think there really is much of that. You can do the main story quests, certainly, but after that point, there will be just a lot of other DLC, or not DLC, but other side quests, ironic there. I used DLC to describe side quests. But yeah. We do have a GameDeveloper.com article here saying that Diablo 4 has driven record quarter for Blizzard and Activision. It was Call of Duty Modern Warfare that drove Activision Blizzard's first quarter success, and it's Diablo 4 for the second quarter. Although if it's a record quarter, then one would assume Diablo 4 is selling more than Call of Duty. I also saw a thing on Reddit that said 7 out of 10 players avoid specific games for their toxic player base. And at a certain level, it's definitely believable, or at least the perception of a toxic player base might drive people away. Certainly it has an effect on me in that I really wouldn't want to play something like Call of Duty or Modern Warfare or Battlefield or Halo, because I definitely have the assumption, I think a fairly right assumption, that that's where the gamer bros would hang out, and players like that would hang out. That being said, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Bloodborne, their player base too has a perception of being toxic with the get good attitude, and the way those games are designed, in that they are mostly single player with the ability to have summons and people invade your game. The invasion mechanic in Dark Souls in general, I think, can be turned off, and it was designed, frankly, to have players attacking other players. So at a certain point, can you call that a toxic community for playing the game it was designed to be played? And that is true for Call of Duty too, or the military first-person shooter games. They're designed to be player versus player, and so if I were to play those games, I'm agreeing to that element. That's not the part that really would be the toxic part, if there is a toxic part. The toxic part would be the chat or being teabagged, which is frankly nothing to really get upset about. Cheaters, yeah. If you include cheaters as part of a toxic community, and there's a game that is just flush with cheating, that certainly, and it really is cheaters and not just bad players claiming there are a lot of cheaters. Yeah, I guess I'm not part of the 7 of 10 if that number is right. I don't think that really. I am not avoiding Call of Duty because I think the player base is toxic. I'm avoiding Call of Duty because I don't want to play that style of game. And yes, I don't want to play player versus player ever. So I'm avoiding it because that's just not my kind of game. And yeah, more power to people who do like that kind of game. Having a little bit of trouble getting the daily quest done today. But yeah, I think that's got to be it for Yu-Gi-Oh! Today. Let's just start talking about the news in general. I didn't open up any cosplay today. I'm going to try and avoid that. Here we have a Video Games Chronicle article. Select Blizzard games are coming to Steam starting in August with Overwatch 2. In particular, as soon as the Microsoft Activision Blizzard merger looked like it was going to go through, we've seen the one thing that everybody has wanted for probably over a decade plus. the integration of some Blizzard games. Um, Activision games in general had sometimes been on Steam. You can't have Call of Duty or not be on Steam. It'd be more interesting, frankly, if King Games also came over. And Steam is very open as far as requiring third-party accounts, so players will still be required to make a Battle.net account. The selection of PC games, though, I bet it's not listed here. There is some concern, certainly, though, that with this Activision Blizzard merger, a lot of these deals might be tied to Windows, and SteamOS and the Proton compatibility layer for the Steam Deck may get somewhat diminished, and any possibility of Linux gaming outside of SteamOS and or gaming on Macintosh and macOS computers may get diminished, because there actually is a small push, and I can only really describe it as a small push for macOS gaming to become a thing again. Inherently, Apple has run into this problem where they've traded big ticket buyers who would have bought MacBooks and laptops and Apple PCs into smaller ticket iPhone buyers, but inherently now we've hit a point of saturation on cell phones, and Apple is going to have a hard time coming out with another gadget that people would be willing to buy. People aren't going back to iPods. They probably aren't going to laptops and PCs. They're trying to push there. They probably aren't going to augmented reality or virtual reality unless it's fairly subsidized and cheap, or seems cheap. It's also worth pointing out, and they've buried the lead, Microsoft and Activision Blizzard have announced that they've agreed to extend the merger agreement until October. So there is now more time. This is a $69 billion deal. Had they not come to an agreement, then Microsoft would have had to pay, I believe, $8 billion to Activision Blizzard as a termination breakup fee. But that also potentially would have created a situation where Microsoft would have just backed out on the whole deal anyways. And Bobby Kotick doesn't want $8 billion when he can get more on a $69 billion deal. And Activision Blizzard as a company would rather be owned by Microsoft. It's a shame that there isn't more of a list of games here. But yeah, Overwatch 2 in general is doing terrible, so them going to Steam is in an effort to potentially get a cheap pop of newer players. And Overwatch 2 is doing terrible because it really should have never existed in the first place, and they should have just improved Overwatch 1 and stuck to that. And they were promising a lot of single player content, I believe, and then they've now reneged. Ooh, that's perhaps not a politically correct term. Yeah, still gotta use it though. I don't know another word. They've reneged on making the single player content on Overwatch 2. And so now Overwatch 2 is basically just a new version of Overwatch 1 with more microtransactions and the things that you had from Overwatch 1 not carrying over to Overwatch 2. I believe Taiwanese ratings board here has leaked the Borderlands compilation, Pandora's Box, and more. Also, Baten Kaitos 1+2 HD remaster, classified for PC. and an unannounced Lego 2K goal has been rated again, which is, I guess, is still technically unannounced. Now, the Borderlands compilation Pandora's Box feels like that's potentially going to be everything except for Borderlands 3. But it could certainly include Borderlands 3. The reason why I think it wouldn't include Borderlands 3 is that I don't think Borderlands 3 takes place on the planet of Pandora. Although, in all fairness, Borderlands pre-sequel takes place on the moon of Pandora, so, and I bet that's thrown in there too. If I was reading this correctly from another source, we'll have to find that story to find out. It might be a case too that this is a compilation being put out by 2K with Gearbox not really being involved, since Gearbox is now owned by Embracer Group and 2K owns the rights to Borderlands. But it's not particularly exciting either to have a new compilation unless you're adding new content or somehow merging 2 or 3 games into one mega game, which it would just be too big of a game at that point. It seems like all that really would be doing is reselling all the Borderlands content, which for a new console maybe that makes sense, or for new players that makes some sense. The Lego 2K goal I'm somewhat interested in that it is probably going to be a soccer game with Lego minifigs, but I don't have a clue how good that really is going to look or how well that's really going to work. Neopets developers have a spin-off. Neopets developers have spun off their company into an independent company, and they're ditching NFT crypto. This was a beloved web browser game. So, yeah. I've never engaged with Neopets or paid much attention to it. It's been around for a very long time, but it has been this web browser game, so it's never really felt enough like a game for me to really care about it. And if anything, that is perhaps a bias of mine in that itch.io, JavaScript, web-based games in general are not anything I ever pay any attention to, and I just use Steam as a kind of curator to say, hey, if it's not listed on Steam, if it doesn't cost some amount of money, I'm probably not going to play it or cover it. This might be a whole new thing for Neopets. But yeah. You'd almost expect in this age of acquisitions for Neopets to spin off to an independent company and then immediately seek being purchased and acquired by a different company. But maybe the owners are going independent because they really have some love and want to make Neopets a thing that succeeds. Looking at these characters, though, it does seem like a weird superhero animal creatures. Let's see. Naughty Dog wanted to say they have patch 1.1.1 now live on PC. It addresses several crashes, visual fixes, and more. Now, we're going to see several patches announced today, and the reason for that is it is the second Tuesday of the week, whereas second Tuesday of the month, whereas Patch Tuesday for Windows is usually the first Tuesday of the month, I believe, if not At some point, Windows may have just evolved into having every Tuesday be a patch Tuesday. But generally speaking, Windows and Microsoft products tend to try and put out a patch, let's assume on the first Tuesday of the month. Uh, that way, patches don't happen on the weekends, they don't happen on a Monday, they happen on a business day that the IT department should be working. So then the IT department would get those patches, or the patches would install automatically. They'd be able to handle any problems that come up, and then they would be able to test it for a week or so. If they did need to put up any kind of patch themselves to address the patches from Windows. And so, in video game terms, the second Tuesday could be patching something that the Microsoft patches patched. So, patching the patch to make your game work better. Or it just is a good schedule to have to always put out patches for your software on the second Tuesday. Although games having patches is still something I'd prefer to not see, and in general, games don't have that many patches. So we've just run into a increase of patch announcements. Here we have Double Fine not announcing a patch, but promoting the cave for seemingly no reason. And it does seem like several people on Twitter, several game companies, just decided to promote things for no reason. We could also see Double Fine here has a rainbow behind their logo, so they're doing the LGBTQ plus new flag, pride flag colors, although they've made it customized for their logo. And so, again, I would say companies should be applauded when they stick to their beliefs. If companies are going to have beliefs, arguably companies are better off if they just not have any political stance or beliefs in general, and were fully neutral. But I think they should be applauded when they stick to it on Twitter. Their shows of support, they're probably very small shows of support. It's not like Double Fine posted anywhere that they've donated any money to anything, or put any time into any projects or efforts or marching. But at the very least, they're continuing to show their support outside of just Pride Month, or like outside of just trying to get people's attention and be a social justice warrior via the internet instead of actively being supportive year-round. Daedalic, weirdly, it goes even further in that they are promoting a game they don't even have any affiliation with here. They here have put in the character from Deponia, Rufus, fighting the Secret of Monkey Island main character, main protagonist. So they're using Disney LucasArts property basically as a parody, but really, I think they're in danger of getting a cease and desist. In comparison, here's them actually promoting a game. This is part of the continued attempt of Daedalic to make everybody forget that they were acquired by Nacom and that they put out the Lord of the Rings Golem game, which noticeably you would have to scroll down fairly far at this point down their Twitter feed to see any mention of Lord of the Rings Golem. Here it is, May 26th. At that point, they're now just trying to push it down without being too obvious of pushing it down. on their Twitter feed. Overall, though, I just don't see any reason to have any faith in Daedalic. And really, you never should have had any faith in Daedalic in the first place to make a great game. Let's see. What was I going to say about YouTube gaming? Oh, yeah, here. These guys are mad talented. Congratulations on 11 years at Game Grumps. So Game Grumps has been on YouTube for 11 years. Have they really been a major positive effect on YouTube gaming? I would say no. Like, if anything, Game Grumps has established this idea, this counterculture idea of let's play video games in an incredibly poor way and cut out most of the footage, add absolutely no real criticism to video games. Like, there are no reviews coming out of Game Grumps at all, and instead it is just them making jokes and spouting off nonsense. It's basically what two teenage kids might do sitting next to each other playing video games, just goofing off and joking, which is fine. It's fine that people do that. Is it fine, though, to make that into the what is that Saturday Night Live sketch? Because that's exactly what they are doing there. Wayne's World, yeah. That's all they're doing is Wayne's World. The difference in Wayne's World, as far as the Saturday Night Live sketch, is that in Wayne's World they're talking about nothing and pretending like they're a public access music broadcaster so they're playing music instead of video games. Game Grumps in particular has done a really poor job for YouTube gaming and gaming on YouTube, in that they've also pushed for a lot of side projects too. Like 10-minute Power Hour is more just comedic skit type things, sketches, comedic sequences, and that aren't really that funny. And then Game Grumps Animated is just using the silly things they say and then having somebody animate it. And then there's compilations that either they're doing or other people are doing that are further getting away from the game. They do not lionize or put on a pedestal video games much at all. And they do not give any information that would be considered helpful or valid information as far as whether or not you would want to play a game yourself, or whether you'd want to purchase a game. They also run into playing the same games over and over again, Jeopardy over and over again. On the other hand, I can be generous and say Game Grumps has managed to spin off and have game developers create 2 games, Dream Daddy Dating Simulator and Homebody. So they've actually created 2 games. But yeah, Game Grumps not really doing a lot for the content of YouTube gaming. Meanwhile, they're getting way too many views because they got in early. Like 11 years on YouTube is basically saying they've been on YouTube since the beginning of YouTube really being a thing. And they've pushed a lot of other content creators to be like them, which has been a major flaw. There is also certainly some important things to say here, in that, like, Ego Raptor, this Aaron, had a different co-host, and they broke up in some minor scandal, I believe. And he just basically replaced him with Dan here, who is really just a comedic singer from a rock band, and he's just, I don't even, I assume they've probably got some kind of friendly workplace friendship going on here, but I would heavily suspect that there isn't any real friendship here too. It's just Ego Raptor hiring somebody to be his second mic on the radio type show, or yeah, his second mic on Game Grumps. If it was just called Game Grump, it would just be Ego Raptor, although that wouldn't really work particularly well. Meanwhile, the bigger point here, to get away from a rant, is this is once again a case of YouTube in general, but YouTube gaming specifically, promoting somebody that does not need promotion. When you have 6 billion views, according to this. Meanwhile, if you start to scroll down lower, you will never see any, like, even up and coming streamer with 1 million views getting promoted. Here's the probably a smaller streamer, what they would consider a smaller streamer, somebody who got in 6 years ago and has nearly 300 million views. Which this probably also highlights that, yes, it's way harder to be successful the later you got into YouTube, but also even 6 years ago, if you'd gotten in, you would have had to have been extremely good or extremely lucky, probably more lucky than anything, to even get 300 million views. I'd almost prefer YouTube gaming to promote random people or promote nobody at all. But I definitely don't want them just like promoting huge, already successful characters. PewDiePie had his baby, speaking of YouTube. I guess it's slightly better than just using Kirby memes. But yeah, YouTube gaming is still a mess as far as what they're trying to promote. We have another patch here, patch 6.5 for Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Activision has confirmed that Modern Warfare 2 content will transfer to Call of Duty 2023. This year's series is expected to be Modern Warfare 3. What they're talking about as content is going to be operators, weapons, and bundles, which maybe is an indication that now that the merger is about to happen, we will see less repeated sales of microtransaction DLC stuff, that they'll stop promoting that kind of gameplay mechanic as much. Which, in all fairness, Microsoft owns, I believe I heard they own about 20 companies now, subsidiaries, under Xbox. They probably own a lot more, Microsoft in general, but I don't think any of the game companies owned by Microsoft are heavy into the microtransaction DLC stuff. There is DLC certainly in a lot, if not most, of the Microsoft games, but Microsoft is noticeably absent when it comes to a game that is all about microtransactions and all about DLC. Whereas Modern Warfare, Call of Duty games perhaps have gotten very microtransaction-y in recent years. Here we have Gemetsu talking about the same ratings. Apparently this is in South Africa as far as the trademarks go. That being said, I guess you're not going to get any real details here as far as yeah, I would need to know what these stand for as far as HLPVCL. Like Lego goal could be humor, violence, and coarse language. And that's why it's rated 13 plus. Whereas Borderlands could be 18 plus for like suggestive dialogue, humor, language, and nudity. What would P be though? Violence, coarse language. And what would PPS be? Yeah. You'd have to be a lot more familiar and do some more research as far as what the ratings board for South Africa, what these markers mean. And I'm assuming I'm reading this correctly. I could be totally wrong. Bandai Namco apparently making a game called Origination. Let's see, Video Games Chronicle has a featured article here, which is basically just an advertisement for the game Unrestricted, calling it the Superman game we've always wanted, which, in all fairness, I guess, we have always wanted a Superman game that actually made any sense, but arguably maybe we've never actually wanted a Superman game because Superman is too powerful as a character in general. Like you have Prototype 1 and 2, and you have the PlayStation exclusive games where you play as a superhero type character, and there have been a lot of superhero games, but to be able to just fly around like crazy and have heat vision may be a little too much. Noticeably, looking at this teaser trailer, it seems like you flying around and floating in the air is just an excuse to allow a character to be wherever you want the character to be, instead of having to deal with the fairly simple problems of just having characters always on the ground. Generally, this kind of looks just like a standard MMO, Chinese MMO game, action RPG game. Yeah. I'm not particularly impressed by what I've seen so far. Laser vision, so you could cut into rock. Seems like that's just really changing the visual texture there and burning it, not actually cutting the rock outward. So yeah, color me unimpressed for Unrestricted. Eventually they might have more to show. The UK games industry issues a new loot box principles to help companies self-regulate. The new industry principles are designed to protect younger players. Um, they don't seem like they're going to go into any real depth here. They want clear probability disclosures, and they want to see advanced protections, it looks like, and that's it. Let's see. So Lego 2K Goal was rated in Korea originally, and now it's been, this article's been updated in Taiwan and in South Africa. There is still some assumption going on that this Lego 2K Goal is connected to this real world Lego set and Lego's push to promote female soccer players, which maybe it will be connected to that, maybe it won't. Although inherently that would imply to me that the female soccer players had sold their likenesses to 2K as much as they had sold their likenesses to Lego, which maybe that happened, maybe it didn't. At a certain point, I wouldn't be surprised if 2K avoids using the likenesses of any real recognizable soccer players and just has a bunch of soccer players in general, of both genders. The Witcher 3's latest patch has added more content inspired by the Netflix series. The update includes quality of life improvements on all platforms. What would the new features be? Well, we'd have to read all of this, wouldn't we? Add an option to switch positions and apply oils from the radio menu. New side quest, The Eternal Fire Shadow and Velen. Rewards are inspired by the Netflix's Witcher series. Alternate appearance of Dandelion inspired from the Netflix Witcher series. Inherently, they're saying inspired from the Netflix Witcher series because they may not really have any legal right to be adding content from the Netflix Witcher series. Although it would be kind of crazy, certainly if we hear a story next week where all this Netflix inspired costumes, it looks like, which I don't even have a screenshot to show us of that, would lead to a lawsuit from Netflix to CD Projekt Red. Yeah. We already talked about this, but Microsoft and Activision Blizzard have extended the merger deadline until October. Microsoft President Brad Smith says the extension will allow both companies to address any final regulatory issues. And then Pikmin 4 has come out, and according to which one is this? Is this Open Critic? I think, yeah. Top critic average is 88. 100% of critics recommend it. There are several mainstream video game critics here. GameSpot giving it a 7 out of 10, whereas Eurogamer is giving it 5 out of 5. IGN 9 out of 10. But yeah, so people seem very happy with Pikmin 4. That being said, mainstream video game journalists also are pretty bad in the fact that they inherently suck up to Nintendo because they don't want to be cut off from press access to Nintendo. But ignoring that, I suspect Pikmin 4 is the Pikmin game you'd want and probably the best of the series so far. Will we get a Pikmin 5? Not 100% sure. I feel like what's going to happen here is Miyamoto has got to retire pretty soon, and then it's going to be up in the air as far as who takes over on certain game series, and if that new person takes over on certain game series, are they going to go in the same direction and make the same level of quality? Unity has opened a beta for a Vision OS development. Developers can start accessing tools optimized for the Apple Vision Pro headset. I guess Vision OS is the operating system for Apple's Vision headsets, the incredibly expensive augmented reality goggles. I believe they're about $3,000, and I suspect they've made about 20 of them so far, because I definitely haven't seen anybody owning any of them, and that may also just highlight a case where the Apple is just not sending out press samples for the Apple augmented reality goggles. And if a lot of YouTubers who review products and things are getting free samples, sometimes they have to send them back, sometimes they're just getting them forever for free. Regardless, that it's a bribe pretty much either way. Just to have access of something for before other people or for an amount of time for free is very valuable. But yeah, the fact that I haven't seen anybody review these or talk about these makes me suspect that they haven't even sent out any press samples to people. Let's see. The Supreme Court, according to Video Games Chronicle, has denied the gamer lawsuit to block the Microsoft Activision Blizzard deal, which leaves them really just with the CMA and technically the FTC appeal, but the FTC appeal is probably not going anywhere. This was an emergency request filed on Saturday. The injunction argued that the deal should have been blocked pending FTC's own attempted appeal of the Ninth Court. Much like the Supreme Court, however, the Ninth Circuit also denied the FTC's appeal. So, yeah. I think the case here is neither the FTC nor this group of gamers who are trying to do like more of a class action lawsuit on behalf of gamers. I don't think either one of them have good legal arguments that they've made, which is potentially to say they didn't have good lawyers compared to Microsoft and Activision, which is potentially to point out how rich oligarchs run the United States, and anybody with the most amount of money can hire the most amount of lawyers to get their way. In general, the concept is not opposed, I think, by your average citizen in the United States as far as Microsoft and Activision Blizzard merging. Even if the entire case was explained to a jury of people, I think the jury would still side with the Activision Blizzard merger going through. There's not a lot of desire in the United States for just a hardline no on all mergers stance, no on big business in general. There is perhaps an argument to be made that there should be more people that are just anti-big business overall. You really can't put the genie back in the bottle, I suspect, but if we did cap the size of businesses as a standard thing and just stopped mergers in general, it would slow down the pace of automation and the loss of jobs that are constantly happening one by one companies are laying off people, and unemployment is going up and up and up. And until we can get to the point where we have like universal basic income, or we have full automation, or we have some kind of replicator that just can give us everything we'd ever want, we probably are at a point now, and this was like the last episode of the Orville New Horizons, which I watched, I think, 2 nights ago. They were talking about the idea of why they can't just give replicators to underdeveloped planets and civilizations. Well, I think the world right now is kind of in a place where if a replicator was handed to us by some aliens, they came down and said, here's a replicator, it can replicate all the food, water, everything you'd ever need. It can make oxygen that's clean and filter out your water and do all of that. If this can just take care of your basic needs, if the technology for that replicator is not that complicated, we almost certainly are at a point where that information would be leaked on the internet and shared globally wide enough that you wouldn't run into the scenarios that the Orville talked about, where a single company tried to sell replicators to everybody for a lifetime license of millions of dollars, or that a single country would try to hoard replicators. And one would hope that the replicators somehow would not be able to replicate weapons, but if they could, that would certainly still be a bigger problem. But yeah, I think because of the internet, that information would leak enough that it would be available freely to all or most people. And then, if we could do that, if aliens came down and gave us a replicator, then we would be in a post-scarcity society, and then the complaints against mergers and the loss of jobs that inevitably come from mergers become mute. What was the other one? Famitsu also has its recent reviews. We don't need to talk about that. And Activision Blizzard thing again. We don't need to talk about that. So, one thing that occurred to me, if I ever do get around to making that third macro to get a better idea of what games people are actually playing on Steam, is that I could very well expand it to try and collect the names of everything that is on the top of Steam as far as what's being promoted, because this is featured content, stuff that is paying for advertising on Steam. Now, very possibly these games are paying for packages to be promoted, and that they're not paying for specific days. And some of these games, I think, are straight up not paying for any advertisements. I would be a little surprised if BattleBit Remastered, for instance, is not naturally at the top of Steam just because it is super popular. Whereas Remnant 2, I don't think is even out, so yeah, pre-purchase now, so obviously that is not naturally at the top. And yeah, I had forgotten that Star Trek Online was even a thing. I don't know how far you go down that direction, though, if you are going to curate a list. Yeah. because when you start to look at things on sale, I might be in a decent position where I should buy like Tiny Tina's Wonderlands now, because the new bundle may be more expensive if you're going to buy Borderlands 1 Game of the Year, Borderlands 2 Game of the Year, and Borderlands 3, which Borderlands 3 seemingly doesn't have a Game of the Year enhanced edition even available for it. It didn't sell as well. And then this Lego Star Wars game here. It's just the main game and a bunch of DLC. Interesting. And there's just no way to put this Saga Galactic Edition on your wish list. You'd have to go to the main games page and just purchase that. And that's the most recent Lego game, so I don't have that one. Alright, video game news from Video Games Chronicle. Let's see. New Xbox Game Pass titles for console, PC, and cloud have been dated. They include Vinba, The Wandering Village, Serious Sam, Siberian Mayhem, and Celeste. In the last stream, we talked about the Game Pass Core replacing Xbox Live Games Gold. Turns out that there are multiple tiers in between, so it isn't just now Xbox Game Pass Core and then the thing above that is Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. I think there's a couple middle tiers, although in all fairness, I think you probably would just go to Ultimate and not get the other tiers. I definitely would investigate that more if I cared or if I played with the Xbox Game Pass. We already talked about Activision Modern Warfare 2 content transferring. July's PlayStation Plus game catalog titles are now available. They include Ascent, It Takes Two, Sniper Elite 5, Gravity Crash, Portable, and Twisted Metal titles. So, seems like there's several more games here listed. And then the premium includes this. It is also worth pointing out that one of the emulators for PlayStation 4 games has hit a milestone in that it now has at least one game somewhat working. One retail game actually being emulated from PlayStation 4. Which, yeah. We may start to see an increase in speed as far as emulation goes. Although, at a certain point, you're going to need a pretty beefy computer, I suspect, always, to run a PlayStation 4. Well, in the next 10 years or so. I think you're going to need a pretty beefy computer to emulate a PS4. And we're getting from the point of needing to emulate the hardware levels of a PlayStation 4 console on a PC. And we need to start getting to the point of decompiling PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 games, or Xbox Series games, or even Nintendo Switch games, decompiling them and having them compiled with the actual machine code that would be much faster for PC, and just having PC ports and PC versions, even if they are just fan-made PC ports. But yeah, decompilation projects in general are starting to get more and more interesting for newer games, and ideally there would be something like Ghidra as far as a decompiling program. that gets better and better about recognizing PlayStation 5 games and saying, I can convert this to an AMD 64 computer code very easily and make a PC port, even if they're not, PlayStation doesn't want a PC port to exist. Let's see. EA has explained its decision to add female to the Ultimate Team for the first time. Quote, we feel we can play a really important role in the growth of the sport. Which, okay. Yeah, there clearly is a real push to make female soccer a lot more popular. That being said, the question, I guess, really comes down to, of the countries that enjoy soccer, how many of those countries are, for lack of a better term, not sexist and would actually have viewers of soccer go and watch the female soccer players play games? Because even in the UK, which would probably be the least sexist of the soccer countries I can think of, I think the attendance on female soccer games is way lower than the attendance on male soccer games. But then when you get into like Saudi Arabia or South Africa, or let's not say South Africa, but just African countries, Middle Eastern countries in general, those countries tend to have heavily restrictive rules and regulations against women, which often either makes them playing soccer less likely to happen or makes it downright impossible for them to play soccer. And soccer in the United States is not very popular, but also in the United States, sexism is pretty rampant as far as sports goes. Like, there is no real legitimate female American Football League or American football players. There's no real legitimate national female baseball leagues that people watch. There's no basketball female leagues that people watch. The only sports in the United States, just to call it the United States exclusively, but it's probably true most around the world, is when you have female volleyball players or other sports like that where the female form is shown off and there's a bit of titillation around it. Ironically, female boxing has even taken a blow towards being a legitimate sport, in that a lewd OnlyFans model went into a boxing fight kind of as a form of trying to do something different, I assume, or self-promote at the very least. And she won the boxing fight, and then she got really happy and excited, and then flipped up her sports bra and showed off her boobs, which were not bouncing anywhere as much as they should have been if they were real, as she was jumping up and down, which this is probably the first case, at least caught on video, of some female boxer intentionally flashing her boobs. Although, in all fairness, there probably have been in ancient times blood sports like boxing where women have fought topless. In fact, I know there's a specific story that of women fencing in like Victorian times, two women fencing topless as to not stain their clothing or get their filthy clothing in their wounds, which that was a major problem in fencing in old times, is that you would get stabbed with a relatively small wound, but the clothing you were wearing was so filthy and germ covered it would get infected and you would die days later. So even a small wound would be really bad. Moving on with video game news. Zelda has toppled physical game sales in Europe in the first half of 2023. Tears of the Kingdom came ahead of Hogwarts Legacy and FIFA 23. So I guess we'll take that headline and just leave it at that. Ratings board leak we talked about. Deal extension we talked about. Bungie's founder and EA veterans have formed a new studio. The company's first game is being developed in the Unreal Engine for Fortnite. So they're making a game for Fortnite or in Fortnite. I've increasingly heard a couple of companies say this, where they're making games in Fortnite or for Fortnite. The list of names here is fairly long. This Outlaw Corral might be the game. Yeah, noticeably they're not even saying the name of the game until we get way down here. This idea of making something in the Fortnite engine, but it's still being kind of Fortnite, is it almost exactly the same as what Valve did decades previous with the Source engine, Counter-Strike Go, Team Fortress engine, all being the same, as that being potentially a starting point to have a good foundation for run and gun jumping and shooting. Noticeably, Fortnite has mostly abandoned the idea of building anything. But if anything, this seems like this is probably a fairly low effort game to develop for veterans that should have more experience and be able to be a little bit more ambitious and develop something better. Like, building something in the Unreal Engine is fine. I don't see a reason why you also need the extra help of building it in Fortnite or for Fortnite. We're still seeing your standard lack of diversity as far as if this is all the new people listed here, then you're talking middle-aged, mostly white guys running the thing, and you're seeing your standard lack of professionalism as far as the dress. This guy looks like he might be Asian or maybe Middle American, South American. But yeah, I would expect more, frankly. And this is kind of a great example of people using Bungie or using EA as a way of promoting themselves. It's very possible that the Bungie founder doesn't know anything about programming at all, or making games, and he's just somebody who threw some money into it, and then the EA veterans could have been the worst EA employees out of the bunch. Moving on, we already talked about the Supreme Court denying the other appeal. Pokemon Sleep is now available in Europe. The app requires players to leave it open overnight in order to track sleep, which inherently is a terrible idea because it's going to drain your batteries or burn in your screen. They need really for the app to be able to access things with the screen off completely, not just dimmed, which I'm not sure that iOS or app or Android would really let you do that. It feels like Apple might have some kind of sleep tracking feature built into its own operating system that it could do with the screen off, but Android I don't think really has added any features like that. Moving on, Diablo 4 is 2023's second fastest selling game of the year in Europe. However, that doesn't include digital sales for the Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which I would assume is still the first fastest selling one. Yeah. Let's see. We already talked about the extension. They had like 2 articles on it. Activision says development of Call of Duty 2023 is proceeding well. If anything, this merger has really just been a long advertisement for Call of Duty 2023. Witcher 3's latest patch we talked about. Diablo 4 has reached 10 million players in June, driving a record quarter for Blizzard. Let's see, we already talked about this one. This is old news. This is old news. This is old news. I heard more about the idea that all devices are going to require a replaceable battery, and the information there is not, the law is fairly broad, so how it actually gets challenged and how it actually gets implemented will be interesting. And it's not until 2027, but that is probably fast enough to say whatever the next Nintendo portable console is will have a replaceable battery. And this is all old news. I guess my macro program didn't register that it had already opened these pages. Apparently, a streamer made a widget to allow chat to play the Ocarina of Time. I also heard about some kind of TikTok live stream thing where I guess that didn't have anything to do with video games. Like these live streamer thoughts, for lack of a better term, Twitch thoughts, are pretending like you're feeding them, and then it's on one of those platforms where you can add like emojis of food, and so they're acting almost like a sim character in The Sims, but it's a real person just being very neutral NPC like. Real humans turning themselves into NPCs is where we've gotten as far as the kind of craziness that sometimes goes on the internet. Let's move on to the Gematsu articles. Let's see, we already talked about that one. I think we already talked about this new character for King of Fighters. Tiny Thor launches August 3rd. Let's see if that has a follow on it. Yes, it does. So, what's going on? Back Alley Chronicle, now in early access in Japanese. From the creator of Back Alley Laboratory. Is this in English? No. I'm gonna have to hope that these news stories are new. So yeah, several games here on the Xbox Game Pass. See, Indie Live Expo 2023 Summer Spotlight is set for July 31st. Announcement for an announcement. Into an Infinite, a Level Infinite showcase has been set for August 23rd. Seems like we're going to get several announcements for announcements. We already looked at this article. A trailer for a game called Gunbrella is now available. Although that is also on my follow list, so I assume I've already made a YouTube short on it. I'm probably going to run into a problem unless I can really upload and schedule videos a lot better. I'm running into a problem where I need to find some extra time to upload YouTube Shorts, or I'm going to run out of YouTube Shorts. Sonic Superstars has an opening animation. I'm also going to have a problem in that however they get uploaded, it's going to come out very alphabetical unless I can do something crazy, which I don't know if I really want to do that by sorting the file selector when you're uploading files by date. Let's see, UF Robot Grindizer, the Festival of Wolves, launches November 14th for the PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series and PC, and in 2024 for the Switch. Yeah. Yeah, Nintendo definitely wants a longer... This is one of those games that might be way popular in Japan and not that popular in the West. Yeah, Nintendo wants a longer lifespan of whatever their new console is. So if their new console has a battery at all, it's almost certainly Nintendo is going to stretch to have a replaceable battery. Which that's probably a smarter move in the long run anyways for Nintendo, because it's not like Nintendo's Switches are going to be thrown out in mass droves just because the battery's bad. There is still a real possibility though that the next console they put out is not portable and doesn't have a battery in it at all. They also probably have to rethink what they're making somewhat to compete with the Steam Deck. So there's, I imagine, one of two scenarios. Either we're going to see a new Nintendo console that has considered the competition, the new competition in Steam and the European Union requiring replaceable batteries, or we're going to see Nintendo at the height of hubris putting out a device that is just what they were planning on putting out no matter what. And at a certain point, that makes even more of an argument to skip whatever this next console is, because Nintendo is pretty bad about having a good console, then a bad console, then a good console. And so it may very well be a skip generation. Apparently Acquire has 7 titles in development, including a new dungeon crawling game and deck builder game. Which I guess is good to know. Let's see, Persona 5 Tacticia has another trailer. Persona 5 Tacticia is going to have apparently a lot of trailers. The Famitsu review scores for issue 1807. Let's see what they've got. Well, they've got just 3 things, and there's more tags at the bottom than there is here. Crime Machina, they're giving 30 out of 40, so not particularly good. Master Detective Archives Raincode, 33 out of 40, so about average. And then Pikmin 4 is getting a 35 out of 40. So not quite as high as, I believe, the 38 or 39 out of 40 that Tears of the Kingdom got, but still a very big success. And if anything, maybe Nintendo has dropped the ball here in that they've had Tears of the Kingdom as a major success, and now they have Pikmin 4 as a major success. So the rest of the next rolling 12 months might be a major disappointment, even though they've announced a lot of things. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the announcements for new Switch games, though, turn into announcements for their next console, and they don't actually come out on the Switch. A romantic visual novel, HHG Megami no Shuin, is coming to the Switch on October 26th in Japan. I kind of feel like, notably, there's just been fewer and fewer visual novels in general And even though we clearly are seeing censorship in as far as anime moe characters like this on Steam and PC, we haven't really seen a lot of Switch games coming out either with moe type characters. If anything, I think the chilling effect of Steam has been far more successful than it should have been, but that is Japanese companies too certainly making the decision to make fewer games with this art style. Arguably, maybe the moe art style in general is just not as popular as it once was, but we're not seeing any anime style visual novels in high numbers. One Piece Pirate Warriors 4 has new DLC characters to be announced on July 22nd. Announcement for an announcement. We talked about the merger being extended. A company called Good Shepherd Entertainment is going to develop and publish games based on the 2000 AD universe. 2000 AD universe is most known by Judge Dredd and the judges in general. That being said, while Judge Dredd is over here, there is a considerably large amount of other characters that I wouldn't be able to recognize amongst this comic series that I think is a French author. Judge Death, potentially here. I'd assume this is a lawgiver gun as it's depicted in the comics. I couldn't tell you this judge's name, but I do heavily suspect she's an important character. But then, yeah. The rest of this characters I don't think I could really name as far as bad guys or grotesque looking guys. Let's see. Judge Dredd, Rogue Trooper, ABC Warriors, and more. They also, apparently Rebellion Developments owns 2000 AD universe, but they also own British comics and characters such as Roy of the Rovers, Sexton Blake, the Spider, the Trigon Empire, Halo Jones, and Hooligan's Haircut. I don't recognize any of these comics. Which, if anything, I think that probably highlights that comics almost universally around the world are not that popular and not that successful. With the major and obvious exception of Asia, where manga comics are highly popular and fairly successful in the fact that they're very cheap to make and fairly expensive to purchase. And yet people do purchase it. But as far as Europe and the West and the United States, yeah, comics never had a major success. And the fact that comics aren't more popular and successful in Europe and Britain and things like that is interesting, because you can't really blame that on just an American puritanical view pushing the idea that comics are evil and will corrupt the minds of the youth, even though I imagine there was a little bit of that in Europe. I doubt Europe bought into that idea that much. They certainly have rebelled against that quite a bit in the 2000 AD comic series. So we're almost certainly going to get a Judge Dredd game first and foremost, and then they'll try to do some other things. I would assume it's not going to be like a Telltale game, even though that might work. I don't think people would sit through an ABC Warriors or Rogue Trooper Telltale game, as people wouldn't really recognize that. I wouldn't be surprised if it's probably mobile games and smaller, simplistic games. A game called Firewall Ultra launches August 24th. Doesn't seem to have a Steam link though. What is it on PlayStation VR 2? I also heard that the fan-based Half-Life Alyx VR no VR mod is has been updated, and they're continuing to make progress to make it a fully polished experience where you can play Half-Life Alyx without VR. But yeah, I'd like to be able to justify purchasing Half-Life Alyx and playing it without VR, but it really should just be built into the game, particularly now since Valve obviously isn't really that interested in pushing VR any further. I would suspect they aren't. Them putting out a no VR official mod of that game would get them a lot more sales, and potentially they could just jump into having Half-Life Alyx also work on the Steam Deck, which is what they should be all in on. A game called Sailing Era for PS4 and 5 and Switch launches July 20th. Or now, if July 20th already has happened in your region, which I guess that goes without needing to be said. What in the world is happening to this page? The background is just taking forever to load. This Sailing Era game looks like it might be a resource management sailing game, strategy game. There might be a logical idea here to focus more on the mercantile concept and shipping, and have mini games around the sea battle, but not try to make your whole game center around sea battle in the way Sea of Thieves seems to be focused. And then our final Komatsu article for today says Remnant 2 Surviving the Post-Apocalypse trailer is available. If you want to check that out. That brings us to the GameDeveloper.com articles, which we've already talked about. UK game industry pushing for loot boxes to self-regulate, which, if anything, this is the culmination of 2 to 4 years of a story in which the UK industry was questioning and having a commission and investigating loot boxes for them to finally come out with some principles that the companies can self-regulate by. But it certainly draws a line in the sand too, even though it's fairly toothless, because if loot box companies in the UK do not self-regulate and follow these guidelines, and are blatantly not following these guidelines, now the UK government has some guidelines that they could turn into law and force people to follow. Let's see. Veteran devs opened a new studio called Look North World to make games in Fortnite. We kind of already talked about that. I talked about Neopets. GameDeveloper.com has this story of early Pikmin concepts, including creatures powered by AI chips and Yoshi-like blobs, which, yeah, it's not super surprising that it would have taken them a while to figure out what a Pikmin would have been. They needed to be really small so there could be a lot on screen. They needed a way to be generated, so them being plants in a world destroyed by pollution and garbage makes a lot of sense. by making the plants also you don't have them laying eggs or being live birthed, which you'd want to avoid. I think they work fairly well too, as standing out as being solid colors. Just red, green, and blue to start with, or red, green, no, red, yellow, and blue. With standing out for the green of the world. And then the flowers being of different levels when they to become stronger and faster. Yeah. It's pretty easy to forget that a lot of what Pikmin is kind of a real-time strategy game where you're leveling up your troops and sending them off to war. We already talked about Unity opening up a beta for Vision OS. Already talked about the merger being pushed. Industry veterans have launched a VR studio and publishing label called Creature, which I feel like there was already a company called Creatures. Wasn't that wasn't a subsidiary or a spin-off company of one of the Pokemon projects? You'd think it would be. This new Creature, assuming there was another one, is led by Doug Northcook, formerly the head of VR at Robot Teddy, another company I have never heard of. Okay, well, we'll see if they make anything. I don't have a lot of faith as far as VR games. And then the classic Call of Duty games becomes Xbox bestsellers after a server fix. Backward compatibility comes in clutch to help older Call of Duties become revitalized. So clearly, because of the server fix, whatever it was in the server fix, people heard about that server fix and started playing the old games and flocked to play the old games. The danger certainly around something like this, though, is that we'll have games that get broken on servers for a while and companies won't care about it, and then all of a sudden they will undo the thing they broke just to try to get a revitalization. Particularly, it might become fairly obvious that Call of Duty games get fixed a month before the next Call of Duty game. We may have hit a point where video game companies realize that they can't keep players' attention with their new games for a full year or game cycle, whatever, whether that's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. So by getting people to play older games again, that still would make them some money. There might be a strategy in that, but the danger certainly is that then all of a sudden it might become very blatant where they're taking down the servers for old Call of Duty games, calling it a bug, and then putting them back up only when they have nothing else to sell you. Let's see. The Steam follow list cleanup could not happen today. And I don't know what to really do with this other than when I reprogram this macro or make a tweak to this macro, just probably recognize when this happens and move forward. Like, I can search specifically for this text. But when I get on the page like this, hitting refresh and reloading doesn't work. It takes the server, which is just taking forever to even load. So, yeah. It takes several minutes, probably 30 minutes, an hour, before Steam fixes its server problem and starts to show me the follow list again. Now, arguably, maybe the problem here is I just have way too long of a follow list, which is definitely believable. But if there was a real issue there, they should stop me from doing it. But yeah, I probably just need to add looking for this text. If this text exists, go forward and move to the next part. All new games on Steam with the auto blur enabled. So yeah, let's potentially burn through these games fairly quickly. Bloodhound looks like it might be something, so I'll give it a follow. Although, in fairness, I am not. I'm not sure I'd really ever play first-person shooter Doom type games. My Child Lebensborn Remastered plays an adoptive parent of Karen and Klaus and experiences the struggles they have to go through alongside them. Balance your time and resources wisely and help children cope with the effects of hatred. So, is this a game where your child is a foreigner, or is this set in Nazi Germany? What is a Nazi kid? Yeah. This feels like this is too simplistic of a game, touching on a really heavy story. You adopt a young Lebensborn child in Norway after World War II, but parenting will be hard as your child grows up in a hostile, hateful environment. See a different side of the war. Inspired by true stories of Lebensborn children, discover how hatred of our enemies continues to create victims even after the victory. Okay. The danger here, though, and certainly there's this case where left-leaning people will just say this is a Nazi apologist game, and that this is just trying to demonize Nazis. Although, in this case, you really can't call these children Nazis, even if they were like in Hitler Youth or something. I think you excuse anything a child does at a certain point during that time. Plus, the danger becomes that this is a story that just never really happened. It's very easy to say something is based on real world stories, but it really is based on only a very small claim by somebody who may straight up be lying. But yeah, this feels like a story that's trying to create compassion. As a video game, though, I don't think it's much of a video game. Perhaps it's just too heady of a topic for a video game in general. That being said, I'll put it on the fall list. I think we'll avoid controversy, though, and self-censor and not put this on the YouTube short. Well, on the other hand, when I say it out loud, self-censoring, that doesn't sound like something I should do. So yeah, let's make a YouTube short on this. Let's invite the controversy. Particularly as a YouTube content creator, if all of a sudden people start commenting like crazy on the short and I get more interaction, even if it is just two sides arguing against each other. I could really use that kind of boost in comments. Not a lot of people have. I don't think I've gotten a single comment on the live streams since the summer started to happen. Murders, game over, streaming, death. Looks like it's an RPG Maker murder mystery game. I'm gonna say no to that. Here we have a visual novel game. Looks like it might be well enough animated to be something. So on this Wednesday, are we expecting to see any adult games? Almost certainly. Tectonica is too neon in its lighting, so I'm gonna say no to that. Well, you know what? I'll give it a chance. Crisis Zone. Yeah, I think the Crisis Zone here is just a exploration game. Alright, we'll be generous. Perhaps I've been not generous enough over the past couple days. Gombo's Gambit could be something. Robo Dash. I'm gonna say no to. Sap. School Days. Looks like it's a 2048 style game of some sort. This one's not visually interesting enough for a short, but I'll give it a follow. Tether. It doesn't look good enough. Glebe Glob is a different type of animation. So it feels like a almost Ren and Stimpy style animation, which I wouldn't want to see a lot of games in this kind of animation style, but would be interesting to see a few games every year in that style. Lethal Application doesn't look like anything. And then that's our first adult game called Garden of Earthly Delights, which is a decent name for adult games, which often have very bad names. So it looks like it's 3D CGI characters hunting fairies, so, and maybe satyrs. Yeah, I would be not super surprised if it turned out that this is a completely still collection of 3D images and that there is no animation at all. There's a lot of male characters with extremely long, extremely thick genitals. And I would say the female characters aren't particularly amazingly looking. Going with the fairy theme, it is really just adding wings, because obviously these are kind of just asset flip 3D models of humans, so they're just adding wings to the backs of people. It's $19.49. It's English with full audio, it says. It also supports Portuguese, Brazil, and Spanish Latin America. It does not strike me as really much of a game. Seems like it is just straight up visual novel. So yeah, nothing there particularly impressive. Although I did like the name. Of course, that being said, you can't use that name again without some form of competition. see, Poo-Poo's Adventure Park. I'm gonna have to say no to this. Just not quite there. Odyssey Moon. Seems like it's the same thing. No. Sister Survivor. Survival Sisters. 2048 1. I feel like plus one. I feel like this game came out like 6 months ago, and now they're putting out a newer version. That seems to be exactly what they did here. It's not in the adult section, it's English and Japanese. The real research, certainly here, though, if you were going to even care, is to see what the original game sold as. And it seems like there might be some slide puzzle images here that actually look a lot better animated than the other characters. Okay. And here is the lie, as it were. Here's the original game. It came out April 7th of 2022. And it too is not in the adult section. And I put it on the fall list, but you can see there's no massively popular situation here. 4 people have reviewed this game. And this is exactly the same game as the plus one version. So I'm going to take this off the fall list. And I definitely am not promoting the plus one version of the game. Let's see, next we have something called Asura, which looks to me like it's probably a Chinese mobile game. English not supported, Thai only. Interesting. I guess that explains the different art style here too. That how the characters are slightly shorter with a bigger head. It's kind of like a moe style, but with slightly different art style and brush strokes to it. I kind of wish that it did support English, but also this game has been in service for 15 years, and if this is 15 years of development, it doesn't look particularly impressive to me. Here we have something called Sanhai Express. Does this support English? Interactive narrative game on the non-linear structure on an ancient Chinese mythological text. Seems to me like this is probably not anything. I'm going to give this a poll just to see if somehow people really appreciate it and I'm missing something, but I don't think I'm missing something. Whereas the experiment here on the first screenshot, I can tell you, is just an asset flip horror game. Valiant doesn't look like anything. Farsiders, a hack and slash RPG, doesn't look like anything. Battle 3D, Zombie Edition doesn't look like anything. Sanjing Dui looks like absolute garbage. We might start to see a pattern here where maybe the Chinese government has paid Chinese developers to promote traditional Chinese narrative stories, values outside of China. That's not unbelievable. You're hunting for color sequences. That's an interesting idea. I don't know if I could really pull it off though. So you're looking for like a gray, an aqua, a gray. But are you looking for the same shapes too? Because you wouldn't really be able to do that. You could go gray, skip these two, aqua, and then gray that way. Or you could just go gray, aqua, gray that way. Let's see. Cute animals and heavy guns. Looks like a top-down twin-stick shooter that's not very polished. Is this an adult game? It sure feels like one. Lovely links. Let me double check. Well, weirdly, this is not in the adult section. It is just an anime girl background in a match 3 game, and I think that's the only image you get. It's $1.39, and it has no mature content warning at all on it, so obviously that's going to be a no. Super Tank Attack doesn't look like anything. Kentrarium Godslayer looks like it might be a Metroidvania game of enough interest to watch it. Put it on the follow list. Kill Crab. First person shooter, single player, but you're doing it underwater. It's polished enough that I'm gonna give it a chance. I'm being very generous today, I think. Undead Wilderness doesn't look like anything. Gunsmith Simulator, interesting idea if it can really get the polish there. Will my YouTube short get demonetized because it has Gunsmith in the name? Interesting question. Something I probably am not going to bother to worry about, though. Still got several games here. I was hoping that we'd be close to being done. Demon Lord Reincarnation. Looks like it's a dungeon crawler with mostly text. If anything, if you told me this was a remake of an old game, I would really believe you, but these old dungeon crawler, almost 100% text-based games are not really worth playing. They kind of weren't worth playing here. Let's see. From the original creator of PC Building Simulator, the Repair House Restoration Simulator, going in a much more varied direction as far as repairing things. Although, in all fairness, how many of these things really get restored or repaired? There's basically 1 or 2 people on the internet that would restore or repair some of these devices, and most of the time it's not worth repairing or restoring any of them. It's easier just to replace most things. Regardless, I'll put it on the follow list. You can see how people would enjoy that in a digital form factor. Let's Revolution looks weird enough for me to not dismiss it. Give it a chance. 9-Ball Pocket looks like a pool game, so I'll give that a chance. But I'm not going to give it a follow because it's just pool. And there are almost certainly better pool games that can be recommended now instead of risking a new pool game. Also heavily suspect not that many people want 2 or 3 pool games. The stacking stones concept doesn't look interesting enough. Galactic Escape doesn't look like anything. And here we are going to run into the end of today's look at all the new games, and noticeably there will be only 2 games, 2 adult games that are 3D CGI, and the last stream was also lacking in any anime style adult games. So I think we are once again in a swing where some person, individual, or group in Steam feels like they have. This looks weird. Weird enough for fall. Feels like they've gotten power again as far as censoring anime adult games. And they're once again at it. Yeah. It seems like whoever whoever was stopping them maybe doesn't work at Valve or isn't paying attention. There's not enough of an advocate group, individual or group, obviously, at Valve. Here's a collection of mini games that look like the mini games you'll see on ads for mobile games. So, would you want to spend $10 to play the clickbait versions of that? It's called Yeah, You Want Those Games, right? So here you go. Now let's see you clear them. Yeah. What's weird about this situation, and why I'm going to have to weirdly put this on the follow list, is these games, these style of games, are built around the idea of getting people to install apps, to see ads, to install more apps. This game on Steam is not around that. It's getting the money up front. So these legitimately could just be all those mini games. Not that any of these mini games are particularly great or even worth playing, but I could see someone being frustrated by all the clickbait ads that show these kind of mini games, and then you don't ever actually get to play them, or you get to play them very minimally as the rest of the game is something completely different. I'm going to put this on the fall list for two reasons. Well, I'm going to make a YouTube short on it for two reasons. One, that people might click on it, and two, it might actually be good. Here we have a English not supported Japanese only game. Looks like it is a lewd anime girl wrestling game from the looks of it. If not wrestling, then maybe cosplaying. But overall, it seems like it's an RPG Maker type game. It doesn't seem like there's really anything going on here. So, can't put it on the fall list because it doesn't support English, and wouldn't put it on the fall list even if I could. But weirdly, we have one more game after this, and I heavily suspect it is not going to be a adult game. This Dead Link prologue is just a prologue, so no to that. Nope. Last game we have today is called T for God, which is an interesting name for a very uninteresting looking game. So yeah, it definitely feels like we have perhaps even surpassed the idea of bundling, where adult games are all released in a row in big chunks, and now we are back to just straight censorship that we have seen before on Valve. Yeah, as far as 2D colorful anime style adult games, we have not seen any in 2 streams. We'll see if something happens Friday, but we'll just have to probably see how long this streak goes, and the longer it goes, the more likely it's going to feel that true censorship is happening, even though we already know true censorship is happening by rules and regulations. Anyways, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's some links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.